Women of Reddit, what's your worst experience with a medical professional who dismissed you just because you're a woman? Went to the doctor with fatigue, nausea, and abdominal pain. He insisted I get a pregnancy test before proceeding with diagnosis, despite me telling him I had not had sex in a year. Sent me to get labs done, and asked me to come back in a month if the problem persisted. Came back a month later, took some more lab tests, same message. After a year, RHE lab tech pulled me aside and asked if I was okay, because this was my 11th pregnancy test in a year. The MF doctor had just refused to try anything else and pregnancy tested me without telling me. Switched to a female doctor, promptly received a PCOS diagnosis. For 5 years I had blood in the urine and urgency. A handful of doctors just shrugged, assuming I have a vagina that bleeds, ergo urine blood. They assumed because I'm sexually active it must be a UTI. Used birth control to skip periods. Still urine in the blood. They still tried to blame my period. They tried to blame UTI even when no bacteria was found. Finally got an ultrasound. Turns out I've been passing kidney stones the whole time. Edit. Yes, it was painful, and my pain was ignored and dismissed as UTI. Go take ibuprofen, aka give yourself the ibuprofen IBS shits, so you grow a bunch of polyps needing a colonoscopy. FA. The American Health No Care System. I told my doctor my new medicine was making my skin burn, and I asked if this was a normal reaction, and he responded, "I don't know. I'm not a psychologist." I was experiencing breast pain, so I went to get checked out. After a scan, I was told there was no visible issue, great, and that it was probably a side effect of birth control, not great. When I asked the doctor if I was just going to have to live with it, he said, "Well, you're getting on a bit. You should think about coming off birth control anyway." Reader, I was 27. I suddenly lost hearing one morning in my right ear at university when I was 20. I went to University Health Services, was told it was a cold. Didn't clear up after a week. Went back. It may take a few months, you have small tubes. Didn't clear up in a few months, went to my family PCP. It's just a cold. If you lost some weight, it'll clear up faster. I don't know where this woman got her medical degree. This continued for 3 years until my new PCP suggested I see an ear, nose, and throat specialist. ENT sees me and says, "You have sudden deafness. You should have gotten steroids the first time you noticed this 3 years ago. I can't do anything else." What? We'll do an MRI just in case. Turns out everyone was wrong. I have a brain tumor. It took me 3 years to get diagnosed because everyone was so incompetent. When I was about 12, my arm really started hurting. I was getting fevers and was in great pain. My mom finally brought me to a local orthopedist so he can check me out. For quite some time, he just said, she is a whiny fat girl trying to avoid school and sports, typical." One day, my mom had enough and almost yeeted the guy across the room and demanded an X-ray scan. Turns out it was cancer eating my bone away. He only said, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know." Appendix ruptured when I was 12. PCP sent me into the ER for appendicitis. Nurse in the ER refused to treat me unless I told her how I got pregnant. I kept telling her I wasn't. My mom kept trying to get any other staff to listen and check me, but the nurse wouldn't let anyone else check me. I was in the ER for 12 hours until shift change, and then the new staff panicked and got me into surgery. They say the worst pain for men is when a gonad twists. My right ovary went through 3 complete rotations while no doctor at 2 different hospitals took my reports of pain seriously enough to run a standard diagnostic test. By the time they finally diagnosed it after 5 days of runaround, the organ was dead and needed to come out in emergency surgery. If it had gone untreated much longer, I wouldn't have survived. First time pregnant, and at about 28 weeks I started having swelling and my blood pressure was continuously higher than normal. Told by 2 OBGYNs I had anxiety and needed to calm down. Okay. Labs were normal, so go home. Started having ocular migraines. 2 different overnight stays in the hospital and still told it was just anxiety. Finally flipped shit on said OBGYNs and requested to see specialist because baby was diagnosed with IUGR due to lack of blood flow, but they weren't concerned. They were pissed but relented. Saw specialist who immediately ran full labs, urine test, ultrasounds, etc. yaw preeclampsia, and full-on hell P syndrome. Had my baby at 31 weeks. Specialists saved my baby's life and mine. Never again will I just accept anxiety when I could damn well tell something was wrong. I have endometriosis. Enough said. I was 39 weeks pregnant and called the labor and delivery ward to tell them I was coming in. Was told to do this before arriving. They told me I was not in labor and to stay home. I called later that evening, giving them the updates and stating that I needed antibiotics 2 hours prior to delivery. They stated I wasn't far along enough in labor since I could calmly talk through my contractions. Called again, was told to stay home. Even if my water was to break, it could still be hours before delivery. They again told me I was too calm to be in active labor. Less than 10 minutes later, my water broke. I drive 30 minutes to the hospital, delivered outside the hospital. The next time I delivered, I was induced. Told the nurse the baby was coming and to get the doctor. The doctor stated I had a long time to go. It was 4 p.m. She stated probably early morning hours. My husband left to call parents, watching our children, came back, and I told the nurse to get the doctor, it's time to push. Doctor got there just as I gave my first and only push, and the baby arrived at 4:31 p.m. Not my story, but my mom's. TW for miscarriage, torture, child loss. So, before I was born, my parents tried for 14 years to have a baby with no luck. My mom had no trouble getting pregnant, but would always miscarry early in the pregnancy. Unfortunately, when she told her doctor this, he came to believe she just wanted attention, because he told her it was completely impossible to miscarry that much. Even though my mom was a nurse, helped deliver babies, and taught LeMays, he said she was imagining things and her body was making up any so-called symptoms. My mom responded to that by saying, "Well then, I'm going to be rich." When he asked why, she said, "Because apparently I can make my breasts grow on demand." Here's where it gets less amusing. Finally, fed up with how she was being treated, she did the only thing she could think of. The next time she miscarried, she gathered the remains from the toilet, put them in a Ziploc bag, and set them on her doctor's desk. Her doctor, to his credit, apologized profusely. She said, "It's fine. What do we do now?" And he admitted he didn't know. Fortunately, after 14 years and 12 known miscarriages, my mom lucked out and I was born. She was later diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which explained the miscarriages, and several other symptoms, which were all, of course, dismissed as a result of her being fat, which is another symptom. Probably the creep who told me, when I was 18, that I didn't need birth control, because if I was raped, I should call the police anyway. Setting aside the fact that I wanted birth control so I could safely have sex with my boyfriend, what were the police going to do to prevent pregnancy? Shoot me in the abdomen? You don't have PCOS, you just need to lose weight. Your infertility isn't from PCOS, you just need to lose weight. 5 doctors and a decade later. PCOS diagnosis. Doctor told me I was too young to have breast cancer and women go crazy about lumps in October. I was embarrassed and ignored it until I had metastatic disease in my skin, lungs, bones, and liver. Went to my gynecologist for having irregular periods and pain. Wasn't taken seriously, he did an ultrasound, found something he dismissed. 2 weeks later, I'm in the hospital, having endured pain for days with really weird bleeding, with the receptionist refusing to take me in until I say, I should have gone to the gynecologist instead of coming to the hospital. After a bit of a back and forth, I say that I will go to the gynecologist the next time. Female doctor then asked me 6 times in a row why I came to the hospital, me answering every time that I am in pain. I was crying after the 6th time. Lady has the audacity to ask me what is wrong with me. She is worried because I seem hysterical. I again, with a raised voice, tell her that I am exhausted from the pain. No more questions. I give blood and urine, wait and wait. She calls me back in. Turns out I was pregnant without knowing it and experienced a very painful miscarriage. A senior physician comes in, the first male person, the receptionist and doctor were female, I encounter, and he actually took me seriously. Finale doctor just sat there, no apology, nothing. He told me to come back the next day. I then twice asked if I should really come because I was explicitly told before to not come to the clinic but go to the gynecologist, and asked repeatedly why I came to the hospital in the first place. The female doctor didn't even care to correct herself. This whole experience traumatized me and shattered my trust in doctors. Male doctor in ER. I went in due to the worst headache of my life. He was annoyed at doing a migraine workup, despite the fact that I said I'd had an untreated aneurysm. Turned out I was in active brain bleed. I was disoriented and incoherent within an hour. I was having a stroke. The doctor wanted to put me in observation. I had to advocate for my admission while I was also missing a lot of words and knew something was wrong. I ended up asking my husband to square it away. As soon as he stepped forward, the doctor backed down and had me admitted. I was in the hospital for 5 days. Another, much smaller one. My son got sick, got meds. My husband got sick, got meds. Went to the very same doctor, described the exact same symptoms, was told it was a cold even after I pointed out that every other person in my house was sick and required meds. Ended up having to go back 3 days later because the symptoms were now out of control and missed a week's worth of work. These meds were basic antibiotics. My husband doesn't doubt me anymore when I tell him what I go through. The sad thing is that it's not just one big memorable case that happened once, but so many little moments from way too many doctors, including female doctors. Starting with horrible period pains not being taken seriously for over a decade, because apparently it's normal for girls to endure pain so bad you pass out from it once a month. I also suffer from excruciating chronic pain, nerves, joints, muscles, inflammation. And I kept hearing things like, just go home and drink a glass of wine. That'll help with the pain. Spoiler, it did not. How about you get pregnant? The hormones might fix you. If you cry, your problems are clearly mental. If you don't cry, it can't be that bad. It's especially frustrating when your illness is all over your body and in large parts invisible or not detectable with the usual exams. Because then it's really hard as a patient to stand your ground. 3 different doctors told me about my heavy bleeding. I ended up hospitalized needing blood transfusions. That, in someone my age, it was probably nothing. Nothing turned out to be endometrial cancer. I showed up with extreme pain in my hip, causing me to have issues walking and needing to walk with a cane. The male doctor looked at me, went, "Periods ami right? Lanindes." Performed 0 examinations and sent me on my way with the instructions to use a heating pad and take some ibuprofen, which I am extremely allergic to and is clearly marked on my chart that if I take it, I will immediately begin to die. Went to a female doctor and she was very concerned and helped me navigate the million referrals needed to land on the actual diagnosis, which was arthritis in my back that led to the nerve damage that was causing my pain. I went to 3 different OB/GYNs because I'd gained 60 pounds in 1 year. I was exhausted all the time and my periods were crazy irregular. I would tell them all this and that I knew something was wrong, that I felt sick. They all did blood work. I'd get the results told to me at my next appointment a few weeks later and get told nothing was out of the ordinary and I just needed to lose weight. A friend of mine finally recommended a fertility specialist. They drew blood and called me 2 days later to let me know that from the questions I answered and the results of the blood work, I probably had Hashimoto's and needed to see an endocrinologist. 2 weeks later, my endocrinologist called me with my results from their tests and told me I did have Hashimoto's, and they got me on Synthroid, got me an allergy test, I changed my diet, and I've now lost almost all the weight and my periods are regular again. Got told I couldn't have a concussion because my hair was too thick after I got slammed into a cinder block wall. Readers, when I went to the ER 2 days later, they found I'd had a minor fucking brain bleed. This is my mom, who would respond except she's dead. Breast cancer, mastectomy. No chemo because they got it all. 7 years later, she complained of pain in her bones. She was referred to a psychiatrist because they thought she had empty nest syndrome. She never went to the shrink and did not return to a doctor for a year, since her pain was, allegedly, not real. Turned out she had the most common reoccurrence of breast cancer. It had metastasized to the bone. So we have a woman with a history of breast cancer complaining of pain in her bones, and they tell her it's all in her head? It's been 43 years and I'm still not over it. Update. If your concerns are ignored, go somewhere else. Get another opinion. Don't let one doctor make you feel badly enough to not seek out proper care. Doctors can be dicks too, so write off the dick and find a non-dick. I took my friend's teenage daughter to the ER. I swear she had pneumonia from the symptoms she was having. I took her in, and they ran tests. She had mono and strep. I asked him to run a pneumonia test for her. He said no, that the chances of her having pneumonia were not likely, and it was probably just the symptoms of mono. I looked at him and told him to run the pneumonia test right now. He huffed and rolled his eyes. About an hour later, he came, said she had pneumonia as well, and gave her a prescription for it. He was so stick-up-your-ass about it. Pretended he wanted the test done, and it was his idea. I almost punched him in the throat. Not a major story, but one that pissed the fuck off me. Although, when I went to see the OB-GYN for a hysterectomy because everything is all messed up down there, he immediately agreed. He said we had tried all other options. Double-checked I didn't want kids and said he'd push it through my insurance right away. Getting one in January. That doctor is the absolute best, and he's fantastic at listening to what you feel and know about your body. Discovered a lump in my breast while taking a shower. I was 33 and had just given birth a couple weeks before. IOFC went to the doc to have it checked out. He told me not to worry, it's just a milk duct blockage that goes away while breastfeeding. The lump didn't disappear, in fact it grew. I went back and asked for a mammogram. I was denied. I told him about the family incidences if breast cancer. He said I'm too young, it's unlikely I have breast cancer. I nodded and went to a doctor on the private sector instead. That was a woman. She immediately arranged an urgent appointment at the radiology for a mammography. At the mammography appointment, the pic confused the doctor enough to do a very long ultrasound of the tumor, it felt like ages, before he decided to take a sample. It came back as cancer and post-mastectomy. It was classified as a pretty aggressive triple-negative BC tumor type that's super rare. Well, I'm not sure if it's because I'm a woman, but that was the absolutely biggest dismissal I have ever experienced. I'm glad I persisted in getting it checked. I was lucky. I've been in remission for 11 years. Oh, I also have a BRCA1 variant that makes my cancer hereditary. I was tested because I was so young, and because breast cancer runs in my family trees from both my mom and dad. At 20 or so, I had quite a large lump in my breast. I was sent in for a number of tests: mammogram, sonogram, biopsy. First, the doc doing the sonogram was mumbling things along the lines, "This does not look good," which did not do wonders to my state of mind. Along comes biopsy doc, male, 50s or so. He tells me the biopsy doesn't hurt at all. Well, it turns out having a large needle shoved into your breast without any local anesthesia actually does hurt. A lot. I wanted to kick his nuts and tell him it doesn't hurt. A male GP once said something along the line, "It's not fair for me to give you a sick leave because of your dysmenorrhea." I couldn't walk upright that day from the terrible period cramp, let alone concentrating and getting work done in office. What's truly unfair is that men's testicles don't get cramps. I would be violently ill for a day. I'm talking about projectile vomiting, bathroom issues, and such intense pain that I would pray to a god that I didn't believe in to just let me die. This happened a few times a year for 2 or 3 years, especially after drinking alcohol. The doctors would say that it was period cramps, which it didn't always happen during that time. The second to the last doctor told me it was probably my hormones and that I was imagining it and wrote me a referral to a psychiatrist. The last time it happened to me, it lasted for 4 days before I found a new doctor who immediately knew what it was. Gallstones. After an ultrasound, I was rushed into emergency and had my gallbladder removed. The doctors that removed it brought it to my hospital room, all excited because they'd never seen a porcelain gallbladder. It's somewhat rare. You can Google it. It was so bad that I had to have treatment for gangrene too. The attacks were most likely a large stone passing through my gallbladder bile duct. I thought I was going insane. I was 18 and I had pain when trying to have sex or undergoing vaginal exams. The gynecologist I had then said one day, "Don't go making a fuss," and referred me to a gynecologist/surgeon who had to perform a hymenectomy on me. I stayed at the second GYN. Was on a wait list for a year for brain surgery. I was finally 1 month away. Doctors prescribed lots of pain management pills in the meantime. I took a pregnancy test and it came back positive. I'm in a panic because all the meds prescribed had the warning, "Do not take if pregnant." I haul ass to doctor to explain situation. He tells me to put it in God's hands. I was so upset, crying, etc. I drive straight home and look in the phone book for a clinic. Closest one is 3 hours away. Call and book an appointment. Head to clinic 2 days later. They take me in. I explain everything. They take me back for procedure, but first have to do an ultrasound. I had a blighted ovum. Would have miscarried anyway. They did the procedure so I wouldn't have to go through a miscarriage before or during surgery. Fuck that first. Doctor, I had 2 kids. I was undergoing a major surgery and on meds that could potentially harm a baby. All he cared about were his beliefs. He didn't even do an ultrasound to even check, just a pregnancy test and, "Aw, sweetie, just, let God dictate your life health." Missed a shattered L5 vertebrae, calling it a muscle sprain because he obviously didn't have the time to look at a fat middle-aged woman's x-ray. You know what whiny liars we are. A male doctor dismissed my suicidal thoughts as just being on my period. I wasn't on my period, but even if I was, alarm bells should have still been going off in his head. Generally, the pain of gynecological investigative procedures not being taken seriously. Having a medical instrument holding open your cervix is incredibly painful, and the advice to take paracetamol 20 minutes beforehand, as some discomfort may be felt, really doesn't cut it. Sedation, general anesthetic, or serious painkillers are required, and certainly when I was going through this, none of these were given on the NHS. Tummy ache and diarrhea bent over. Double pooping blood was told. It's women's problems, reality. I had a perforated ulcer. Was in labor with my first and had an epidural. I told the nurse that I could still feel pain and she told me I was confusing it with pressure. Went through delivery with forceps and she kept telling me to stop screaming, that I was being hysterical. Needed stitches. Felt every single one. Come to find out the epitube wasn't taped down properly and had fallen out. You'll need to work on fainting when you get an IV, or you'll never be able to handle pregnancy. I was 12. I was in the ER and had just been diagnosed with vasovagal syncope, which is when your heart, blood pressure, and nervous system malfunction. I'm not scared of needles, it's just an automatic and unconscious response. I've passed out mid-joke. This was also after I told them to get an experienced phlebotomist, and they had the nursing student stick me and move it around. Dismissed my symptoms for 2 years. I had cancer. If he had listened to me, I would have been stage 1. Instead, it got really bad and I fought it at stage 3C. I had a C-section in June. I popped a stitch or 2 in the shower, and my incision ripped halfway open. My doctor came in the next morning with plans to discharge me. I tried explaining to him that my incision was ripped open, and he insisted that it was normal for that to happen sometimes. My husband had to jump in and my doctor finally took it serious. This doctor also delivered my youngest a month early, without my full consent when I felt like she could have baked in me for a little bit longer. Thankfully, I'm done having children, so I won't have to deal with seeing him anymore. What's the worst thing a woman has done on the first date? I showed up to grab a drink and she was already blacked out. Chatted for 30 minutes and left. The next day, she messaged me asking why I never showed. Showing up to the bar 7 hours early and proceeding to get blackout drunk while repeatedly texting me throughout my workday saying I should just come now is the first thing that comes to mind. The most confusing one I've ever had was when I met this girl at this place. We sit down, some nonchalant BSing, normal stuff. She asked me when my birthday was. I told her. She goes, "Oh, you're a Leo? What the fuck?" And she got up and stormed out. I was like, I may have just dodged a super ultimate bullet there. She referred to her 3 daughters as cunts in a conversation without me even knowing she had children. Yeah, cut that night short. Funny enough, she was the ex of coworker, and that created a whole new level of drama. Only talk about her ex and the breakup, talking in details about all of it, and refused to change the subject. The best part is the breakup happened when she was 22. She's 35 now. Fun times that was. Brought a friend to dinner. Okay, sure, bring a buddy, I suppose. But the friend wanted to sit at the table and not the bar so we could have some privacy. and they both thought I was going to pay for dinner for all of us and drinks. And friend made it clear she was only there to cockblock because her friend liked to sleep with guys and she was there to prevent that. I kind of felt like I was being accused of a sex crime. I just looked them both in the eye, told them, "I ain't the one," and left. This was before we even got our drinks too. Told me she was pregnant by her roommate fiancé? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I met a girl via a dating app. Wasn't instant sparks or anything, but she seemed nice enough and we had some shared interests, so I invited her out for dinner and she accepted. She showed up to the date looking like she'd rolled out of bed. Sweatpants, a plain t-shirt, zero makeup. I'm not someone who thinks a first date needs to be all dressed up and formal, but it was clear she had put zero effort into her appearance. We sit down to eat and she absolutely refuses to engage in the conversation. Every question I asked got a 1 or 2 word answer with zero follow-up. Have you ever been to this restaurant before? No. How's your week going? Fine. I saw on your profile you coach Little League softball. That must be a lot of fun. It's okay. The entire time. It was painful. I finished my meal quickly, walked her to her car, thanked her for her time and left. Later that night, she sent a text saying, "I had fun tonight." I figured she was just being polite, so I didn't respond. The next morning, I woke up to a text with multiple paragraphs from her, calling me a jerk for ghosting her and saying how if I wasn't interested in seeing her, I should be upfront and say so. It was, and I'm not exaggerating, several times as many words as she'd spoken the entire date. To this day, I'm perplexed by the whole thing. All I can figure is maybe she was really anxious or something on the date? It was bizarre. We had previously agreed on a restaurant, time, and to just do separate bills, to which I would offer to pick up hers at the end to be polite. I arrived on time and MSG'd that I was there. I got a reply stating she was already inside and seated. The server had just bought her another glass of wine and was walking away with an empty wine glass and a shot glass. The first words out of her mouth weren't even hello, they were, "You're paying, right?" I don't have any money. I didn't breathe a word. I just turned around and left. We had ordered drinks and an appetizer after she picked one of the most expensive restaurants in town. She took a few sips and then asked me about my job. I explained a little bit about it, said it was pretty boring unless you are a software firmware network nerd, and asked her about her. She asks, "Does it pay well?" I kinda agree and then try a second time to change subject. She says, "I'm asking you how much you make, because I don't want to waste my time on someone who is broke." I tell her that it's complicated because when you get to a certain level at a company, you become a flight risk, but also a risk to their long-term strategy as you are considered a strategic asset. So they won't overpay you, but your salary is basically name your price. She says, "Do you make more than $250,000 a year or not?" That's when I knew it was unsalvageable. She was not just tactless, but rude as well. Also, she would invariably be the type of person to think they should spend all the money as fast as they could. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Image thinking. $250,000 a year is a lot of money. Paid for the food, tipped stupidly, and left." It was the only date where I felt like I couldn't continue it. This was back in my high school days around 2002 to 2003. A girl from the cheerleading team asked me out and of course I said, absolutely. It was a Friday night movie date, simple date, movie, and maybe some ice cream afterwards. I showed up 15 minutes early to buy the tickets. Movie was her choice, communicated during our initial date conversation. I waited in the concessions area. 15 minutes goes by, no call, no show. For you kids. This was before the first iPhone existed. God, I am old. No message on my Nokia phone. I still have it, and it still works. I wait another 15 minutes and the movie is about to start. Still no call, no show. I wait another 10 minutes before I head into the movie by myself. I hated the movie. It was called 13. After the movie was done, no call, no show. So I went home. Next Monday, a bunch of the guys in my class and girls were all asking how my date went while snickering. I was set up on a fake date. Bragged about stealing, yes, literally stealing behind his back, her last boyfriend's Gucci watch. then proceeded to complain about her last date for being too fat, then genuinely got offended I had an Android phone instead of an Apple. Real nice person. She was late and explained that she needed to break into her ex's house, who she broke up with less than a week before. Real quick. She then showed me her bad, unflattering nudes that she posted on Reddit. Edit. I do not remember where the nudes were posted. Rolled her eyes over the idea that I researched where to take her on a date. It was a cafe with a harpist. That shit was magical. OMG, I have one. A beautiful girl in my college class invited me on a date. We were in the same study group and fast became friends, hanging out on breaks and meeting up at the library. She picked a fairly upscale restaurant, at least for college kids. She dressed to impress, and she was comedic, animated, and held a great conversation. She was very flirty, and I knew where this was heading afterward. The bill comes. It's more pricey than I hoped. We were drinking a fair amount, but she grabbed the check. I offer to pay my share and she rejects it. She says her dad's a dentist and gives her plenty of money. I, on the other hand, pay for my own school, rent, and bills by working at a restaurant, eating leftovers off of plates and scrapping by. So I was stoked that she invited me, is paying for the date, and clearly, she is planning on using me for hot sex. Then, her debit card is rejected. And her credit card. And her other card. She is turning multiple shades of red, talks about must be fraud, etc. I serve tables, I just make eye contact with the server, and we both play along with her. Server leaves to try the card one last time. I excuse myself from the table, catch up with the server and tell her to run my card, but I may be short and certainly don't have enough to pay a tip. I promise I'll come back with the difference and a tip before closing. That taken care of, we head to her car, but she can't drive, I dare not. My apt is close by, but she insists on driving. I make a move to kiss her, she gets sloppy with me, so distracted I take her keys from her coat pocket. I tease her with the keys, say I'll drive because it's confusing where to park at my place. She is in the passenger seat. I actually have no intent to drive, but I needed time to figure out the next moves. I have to get money and go back, so I'm not stiffing the server, but I need to gracefully exit the date. Problem solves itself. She looks me dead in the eyes and says drunkenly something like, "I will suck your dick all night if you pick up some coke. You work at a restaurant, right? You know someone." The entire evening just made sense. Up to that point, I was sympathetic, thinking how embarrassed she must be. Now, I'm pretty pissed. So, I decided to drive her back to her apartment through a stream of begging, sobbing, then yelling, and all the antics you could guess. I walk towards her apartment. She's following, trying to pull me back. Roommate hears a ruckus and intervenes, although confused AF. My date is so worked up that she starts to yak on the walkway. Roommate sees her GF is super drunk, so corrals her inside, where, with vomit on her dress, all of a sudden seems totally oblivious to the entire night, is acting all cute again, saying how great the date was, do I want to come inside, etc., etc. I quietly hand the car keys to roommate, who is pulling her inside. I bail. Rest of the night, I'm off to my work where I barter friends for some cash. I then rush back to the restaurant and catch our server in the bar area. She stuck around with other off-the-clock friends just in case I returned. The place was basically closed at this point. So I settled up with her, although with about $8 in change. The group had heard all about my date, so they invited me to sit and share the rest of the story. Bar comped me a beer, so I started, "Tonight was the worst date in the history of dates." I don't have any total horror stories, but when I was away at school, like 2 hours away from home, I matched with a girl from my hometown when visiting my parents. We talked for a few days and she wanted to meet for dinner, but I had already gone back to school and it was the middle of the week. So I skipped an evening lecture to go see this girl. As a horny 19-year-old, this seemed like a good idea. And drove 2 hours in the dark and snow. Got to the restaurant, and when I went to message her that I was there, I found she had deleted me off everything. I texted her, we didn't text often but I had her number, and got no response. Still have no idea why she did this, but she was well aware I was driving 2 hours to meet her. The last message she sent me was after I told her I was leaving, telling me to drive safe. Not sure what changed during the 2 hours I was in the car, but I never heard from her again. Needless to say, my parents got a surprise visit from me that night, and I didn't feel like telling them why. snapped her fingers at the waitress to get her attention. All right, I was talking to this girl for a while online and we were hitting it off great, common interests, can't stop talking, all the cutesy stuff. We set up a meet to chill at my place. I'm sitting there all excited BC, I'm gonna get some cat. I get a text, she here. I run outside to see a big-ass pickup truck, her in the back seat, and her parents in the front, y'all. I was 23 at the time and just kind of looked at them. Her dad leans out the window and goes, "You know she's 17, right? Like, it's fine, but you're the legal adult for a bit, so don't let her get into nothing." Bro, what? Felt like Pops was pimping out his kid to me. I just noped the fuck out of there and walked back in my house, deleted, unblocked her on everything. And about a month later got a snap from her along with a picture of my house talking about, "It's my birthday. We can be together now." So yeah, I stopped talking to strangers on the internet after that. Where do I begin? Within 5 minutes, she told me she just broke off an engagement. 10 minutes later, she said she went out with a guy the previous week, hit it off with him. But then when he went to the bathroom, she left the bar with another guy in a cab. Told me to buy her drinks. Said I'd be sitting at the table while she's in the bathroom. I look up 10 minutes later and she's talking to the bartender drinking. Asked her what's up. She said she didn't see me. I drank her beer and left. Texted her that I had a great time sarcastically and said she wanted to meet up again. Wacko. She brought her kid that she didn't mention. She looked nothing like her photos. Invited me back to her place, which looked it hadn't seen a cleaning product since it was built. Did blowtorch dabs for 20 minutes before acting like it was time for me to take her to bed. I said I needed something from my car and left. She still texted the next day asking when date 2 would be. Decided to go into detail how she was molested by a friend's father from ages 8 to 14. And then, when I was trying to digest all that info, she started planning our summer vacation the next year. She called me racist for calling a black person George. The guy's name was George and he's a friend of mine. Both of us looked at each other. Turns out racists used to call black people George at one point. Either way, she refused to apologize or act like she made a mistake, so George asked me if I wanted to join his group. Only time I have ever ditched a first date. After dinner, she asked me to drop her off at her friend's house. She talked shit about my dog and said he looks ugly. Kicked her to the curb real quick. 2012-ish hit up the eHarmony game. Met a cute nurse, and we met for dinner one night. Dinner turned into drinks. Drinks turned into my place. 10 minutes after we're done, snuggling in bed. "So now you're gonna throw me away just like all the rest, and not in some sad or damaged voice? Fucking angry voice. What? You're all the same, just fuck me and throw me away. If I'm pregnant, don't worry, I'll take care of it and you don't need to know." I'm floored. Asking what's wrong, where's this coming from? Devolves into this crazy situation where she's crying and yelling at me, and I'm trying to calm her down. I told her I thought it'd be a good idea if she left. She said she'd call the cops. I ended up having a sleepless night with her later, and then goodbyes and see you soons in the morning. Chatted with her just enough to get some CYA materials. Ooh, why'd you say you were gonna call the cops? I didn't do anything. Sorry, honey, I know, but I was angry and just saying crazy things to make you scared. But that's okay. Now's blocked. Spent weeks expecting her to jump out of the bushes and stab me or something whenever I went in and out of the apartment building. She spent the entire time talking about Julia Roberts. Like it was brought up so much, like half the night was spent discussing her love for Julia Roberts. I was neutral on Julia Roberts at that point, but after the date, I didn't like her out of spite. Sheesh. A Tinder match once invited me out to meet with her and some friends at a bar. When I got there, she was making out with some other guy. Worst of all, she tried to deny it. Told me I had 12 months to propose. I proposed that we get the bill because I had to wash my dog's hair. I once went on a date with a girl who I swear had absolutely nothing going on between the ears. She was good-looking, cute in the way I like, but my God, it was like carrying on a conversation with a naive rock. I am a mostly gay man. At some point in time after a bad breakup, I decided to explore a bit. There was this one girl that I liked, and we talked for a bit before going out. I knew she had lost a kid to some crazy drama involving the father's family. She knew I was gay, and this was new for me. She loved that shit for some odd reason. We go out. It goes well. We go back to my place. It gets hot, she says. You don't have to use a condom. I'm on birth control. I'm like, I absolutely do. We start fucking and she reaches down and pulls it off. I firmly assert that we need this. But I want to have your baby. Bruh, what the fuck? Was in the bathroom a long time. She was going through my medicine cabinet, checking labels. This isn't terrible as much as it was very strange. I'm from upstate New York. She was from Florida. She had made several questionably accurate statements throughout the night, but I finally said something when she claimed lacrosse originated from Florida. It's pretty well established it came from the Iroquois tribes of western central New York. She proceeded to open Wikipedia and read the entry while inserting Florida throughout in an attempt to prove her point. I dropped it, but checked when I went home and she was just openly lying. Told me I shouldn't let others know I'm in therapy. I was a bit late to the date due to this. Then told me she's technically still married, but she ran from her abusive husband, wanted to call things here, but we were at my favorite pizza joint. Is very drunk as she has been there a few hours. Picks a fight with the table next to us. Leaves to go smoke for 30 minutes. Tries sticking me with a $200 bill racked up by her and a friend of hers. Paid for my pizza and got the fuck out of there after apologizing to the table next to me. Went out with a girl to a concert, aux live band karaoke. I got there first and chilled with a drink. She acted like she didn't see me, then texted me to hurry up because she was there. Then told me about every dude she hooked up that we passed at the concert. There were multiple. She got really drunk, made a fool out of herself on stage, drugged me around all night, and asked me to hang out with her in her car. Then she started crying because she didn't want to be alone with a stranger but also didn't want to be alone, so could I please wait until her other male friend got there? She asked me to sit in the back because her friend always sits up front. I dipped out after that last one. Girl was a train wreck. I went in for a hug and she jumped 3 feet back. Anyway, we're married now. Pooped her pants in my car on the way home. Had been talking to this woman for a couple weeks and we decided to go out on a date. She lived about 5 to 10 minutes from where I was at and called me right before I pulled in her neighborhood and said, I need more time, give me like 30 minutes. Okay, cool. So I just drove around listening to music for about 30 minutes and then went to her house. I knocked on the door and she answered and said to give her about 10 minutes. I went back to my truck and sat and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20 minutes, then a car pulls up behind me. And it is her gay friend he runs in her house with a 6-pack of wine coolers, blocking me in her driveway. Finally, after about an hour, her friend comes out and says, she's coming. About 10 minutes later, she comes out drunk off her ass. I still took her out that night, and we ended up dating for a year. Looking back at it, I think I was only sticking around her because of depression issues and loneliness. Had went through a rough divorce 6 months earlier. Needless to say, lesson learned. She told me to pay for the meal, as a way of repaying her for her time spent applying makeup. She asked for the date. Matched with a girl on Tinder who invited me to her stand-up comedy routine, and then proceeded to tell jokes about how disgusting the guys she meets on Tinder are. It was like something from a sitcom. They weren't even good jokes. She had no punchlines. One was just about a guy who had a strap on in his profile pic and nothing after it. So I heckled her with a fine, "I'll just change the picture," and then left. Got a couple of laughs though. Told her I wanted to use my law degree to help out with humanitarian purposes. She proceeded to go on a rant about how Syrian immigrants were worse than the rats in her country. Left promptly during her bathroom break. What's the scariest thing about being a woman? There is a long-standing stigma of women being overly dramatic and medical professionals, even female professionals, dismissing their pain or discomfort. I had several friends of varying ages who were misdiagnosed or ignored because the doctors assumed it was a pregnancy or period-related problem. Meanwhile, my older brother went to the doctor for what was essentially heartburn and got every test under the sun to diagnose it. That almost any man you meet can easily overpower you without much effort. Any woman who ever had to physically fight a man knows well how helpless she felt at that moment. Other things have been mentioned that I agree with. I'll add, not being taken seriously, especially in a medical situation. Example, I went to the hospital in severe pain, and the first things I was told and checked out for were period cramps and pregnancy, though I said it was neither. I felt like I was dying. After being pregnant and having 2 kids, I can say it felt like neither. Turned out I had a severe kidney infection and could have died. Edit to add, since some people have mentioned it seems like a routine thing to I was placed as not urgent in the triage list and waited hours before they got to reviewing my test results. I sat in the corner of triage streaming, feeling like I was dying and trying to tough it out because I felt ashamed and like an inconvenience that I went to the ER. When they finally did get to my results, they quickly changed their tune and treated me immediately. I could have gone septic while waiting for them to treat me. For me, it would be being SAE'd and then, even worse, not believed. I work with domestic violence and SA survivors. I don't even know where to start, including men and LGBT survivors, elderly and children, human trafficking and stalking. Scariest but most frustrating thing ever for me has always been our lack of physical strength. Scariest because I'm always suddenly aware of that strength difference when a guy's upset or when I'm walking somewhere at night, and it just makes me feel so weak and I hate it. Most frustrating when it's used to mock us by certain men. Not all men, of course, or not take us seriously. I am male, but have seen it said before when regarding going on a first date. Men are scared she will be fat. Women are scared they will be raped and/or murdered. When I was young, I thought that was just anti-male hyperbole. But then after I met my ex-wife and she told me the horrible things that have happened, then other women close to me opened up, I no longer think it was hyperbole. Men do terrible things to women and often go unpunished. I am not surprised women fear. It is horrible to live in fear like that. It's not fair and it's not right. Anyway, not sure what else I can say. I just hope the good guys outweigh the evil. Probably the fact that there are men, of which you can never identify with certainty until it's too late, who will prioritize their desire for your body over anything else. Your consent, your well-being, your life, anything. The rise of incels and the manosphere, I am genuinely afraid of what is going to happen once these teenagers raised on alpha male podcasts and incel communities start getting into politics and law. I am terrified. I'm terrified of the way YouTube is pushing this content mercilessly in their algorithm. I'm afraid of the way some argue women shouldn't have rights, shouldn't vote, domestic abuse should be legal. I'm just honestly terrified that this content is going to lead to a wave of misogynist and dangerous policies in the future. I guess it depends on where you live, but as a Mexican woman, I'd say existing is the scariest thing about being a woman. Just Google Mexico feminicidios, and you'll get it. A man could kill me without even breaking a sweat. Dudes will literally beat the shit out, or even kill you in a fit of uncontrolled emotional rage over mundane things, while simultaneously claiming you are the one that's unable to control your emotions. Pushing a baby out my hoo-ha. Not knowing who you can trust, that is probably the scariest, because every man you pass by or meet is a potential threat. Even if they are the sweetest soul alive, you still have your guard up and aren't sure if it's all an act or not. Even with friends, at least, I have learned that you never really know who has ulterior motives. It's that there are so many people who are willing to impregnate me against my will because they see me as a mere tool. And pregnancy really destroys my body, so I don't want to get pregnant. There is a study that found that men are 6 times more likely to leave their wives who are terminally ill than the other way around. In Canada, women are 5 times more likely to donate a kidney to their spouse than men are. Only 6.5% of husbands who are acceptable donors go on to donate. The disparity is far more extreme in some other countries. In Canada, the proportion of women killed by domestic partners is 8 times greater than men. For whatever societal reasons, women in heterosexual relationships are statistically overwhelmingly less likely to find the love and support that we rely on our partners for than men are, and are statistically far more likely to be endangered by the people they love. That's terrifying and tragic. Being raped or murdered by a man you trusted. The average woman is not as strong as the average man. The thought that they could do it at any moment always lingers. Falling in love with someone and trusting them and sacrificing for them only to have them leave you when you get old. I'm so scared of that happening to me. We have to check in with our friends whenever we go on a date to make sure we have not been killed. Winter, it's like been on house lockdown because it gets dark so early, and it's not safe in the dark by yourself outside. Having to rely on men in order to have rights. Feeling like an inanimate object created for others' use, pleasure, and victimization. I was a smart, sunny kid who trusted everyone. I am now a menopausal woman who trusts no one. The things that happened in between are a whole novel, I suppose, but suffice to say that I am still working to see myself as a person who has value beyond her visual and sexual being, who can be loved as a person completely separate from my appearance, and who still has something to offer the world. This becomes more difficult as I begin to disappear, which has happened as I have aged. It is bizarre and hurtful and unsettling. I don't know what else to say about it, except that my sense of self has been put through the shredder and the mill too often. And I really never expected this to happen. That there is no cure for some female-specific diseases, PCOS, endometriosis, but unisex male diseases are much better researched. Loss of reproductive rights in certain areas of the US. I'm a violent crime survivor, and I guess as a woman it's a fear of being attacked again. Society's expectations of women are pretty terrifying. The fact that my basic human rights are up for debate and are not guaranteed. Men. Everyone talks about walking alone at night, and it's 100% true. I know that if something happens to me, there's no way I can fight back. That's why I have to carry like a rape whistle and mace. Going pretty much anywhere alone, even during the daytime. The fact that I've had to learn to be aware of my surroundings just because I'm a woman makes me mad. Having to have my rapist's child against my will. Been there, nearly done that. Gotta love a chemical pregnancy. Knowing that over 50% of the population could overpower me anytime they want. How easily I am to lose at a physical fight and get sexually abused. It's very easy, FYI. Last night I was walking down a busy nightlife street, sober, and a random drunk guy grabbed my arm to get my attention. So yeah, like all the other women are commenting, men are the biggest threat. Thinking about the horrible things soldiers do at war, in conflict situations, the ways they torture and SA people, how normal it can become. And knowing those men aren't monsters, they are human. And wondering how many of the men around me would love the chance to torture and assault people if they thought they could get away with it. As a heterosexual woman, you have to date your only natural predator. You can also choose celibacy, but the predators will be still lurking around everywhere you go. The fact that every single one of us will have experienced sexual assault of one degree or another in our lifetimes. You are trained to find comfort in other women, but not warned that women can do just as disgusting things as men, if not more so. There was this attitude growing up that women mothers were inherently good and could do no harm. That belief caused me and I'm sure so many others so much harm. Women and mothers can be despicable people too. Knowing that whether or not someone sees you as a person worthy of agency and respect often has nothing to do with how you act or who you actually are. That goes double when you're a queer woman. Double standards for both men and women, but also the horrifying feeling of not knowing whether the person behind you is just walking home like you or wants to rape you. The way men view and treat us. Their ignorance. Not comprehending that as a woman, we've all been harassed and bullied and stopped and followed by men before. Not all men, but men. Not understanding that we are attracted to something that could literally kill us at any moment. I'm talking about women who are attracted to men specifically. Nothing wrong with any other type of attraction that just happens to be my topic here. Men don't have to worry about that in a general sense. They don't have to fight knowing that at any moment the same person they are sexually or emotionally attracted to could just kill them if they had an anger spree. And I'm not just talking about somebody who has a history of anger problems. Men are built with more muscles and more strength than the female body. That's a mindfuck. Or having to deal every day with sexism. Especially in markets like credit cards or loans or car sales or home sales. Being treated like we're just stupid hoes who only know how to swipe credit cards. Always given the worst deal because We have a vagina instead of a penis and can't even talk about it with men because they just laugh and act like sexism isn't a real thing. Having to constantly defend ourselves or explain ourselves. Having to be made feeling guilty if we don't feel well because we have our menstrual cramps that are trying to rip us in half. Men trying to use our desire for equality as a form to punish or abuse us. Always having to do everything in an almost cartoonish polite ways that we don't upset a man's emotionally stunted ego and have them just go off on us because that is scary as hell. And then always the pressure always look perfect and act perfect and just wake up looking like Barbie. Knowing that we will be both criticized if we have makeup and criticized if we don't. Criticized if we spend money to get our hair and nails done and criticized if we don't. Judged and compared to pornography and celebrities, and always feeling the pressure that if we dare to even once said we don't want sex one night that we have somehow let down our man, but if he doesn't want sex with us one night we just have to shut up and accept it. And of course the social pressure where woman is supposed to not only have a full-time job, like a man is, but she's also supposed to clean the whole house and take care of the household, and organize and pay all of the bills and make all the appointments and single-handedly raise the kids and do all the grocery shopping and the errands, and clean the entire house. If a man does even 10% of that, he's raised up on a pedestal, whereas a woman is criticized if she doesn't. A man brings home pizza, and he's cool. A woman brings home pizza, and she's a fat slob. Being a woman is scary because of all the social expectations, and no, it's not just women expecting it of other women. That shit comes because men are judging, and they treat us in a certain way, and they judge us, and they treat us like we're bimbo who only want to spend their money and have no idea how to do anything. To the point, it's become basically a competition to who can be the most women, which is where the women against women idea comes from. Being a woman is a constant need to prove that you're woman enough, not knowing if a guy is being friends with you to take advantage of you, or if he's being actually genuine. I'll echo what many others have said. The scariest thing is having to be on guard and hyper-aware of our surroundings. Going anywhere alone can be scary, especially at night. Dating is a nightmare, and you literally have to share your location and details with a family member or friend in case you get raped or murdered. Most women have stories of abuse or harassment of some kind by men. And men always say, not all men, and that may be true, but it is so much safe to assume that any and every man you encounter could be dangerous. That fact is scary and sad and utterly exhausting. It's so funny how in the post for scary things about being a woman, the overwhelming answer is basically men. Men raping us, men killing us, men trapping us with kids, and then abusing us. Them assaulting us and then blaming us for our assault. Them assaulting us and then accusing us of lying, etc. In the post for scary things about being a man, the overwhelming answer I saw was their reputation. Being perceived as a pedo, being perceived as a creep, etc. And while being perceived as a threat must suck, I can't help but not feel bad because that's the result of their behaviors. You don't get to historically and systematically oppress and assault women and children and then walk around this world with a reputation of being protectors and leaders. Women face hardship because of men. Men face hardship because of other men. General safety. I hate that I have to constantly be aware of my surroundings. I purposefully bought a low-key looking beige purse with a strong strap and the bag sits in front, crossbag style. I dress very dull and average if I'm spending the day out doing errands so that I don't attract attention. I literally bought dull clothes just for this purpose. I'm usually a very friendly, extroverted person, and I'm very cautious now on who I talk to when out, if at all, and I'm never on my phone or distracted by it. Knowing that any man is physically capable of overpowering me with his bare hands if he just decides to. Walking alone at night and rejecting guys. The fact that Roe v. Wade was overturned barely 2 years ago, yet many men think feminism has gone too far. We have a lot of holes and some men feel entitled to putting things in them without our consent. They get really upset when they're told no. All it will take to subjugate women is enough men to decide that it should be done again, or that it should forever continue, in countries where women still don't have equal rights on paper. That's it. That's all it will take. In America, we all have voting rights, but our voting rights can actually be taken away. The only reason we got them to begin with is because enough men, good men, who took action, believed we have the right to vote too, and backed up our voices with their voices. But men are feeling increasingly disempowered by the system at every level, in both education and in the workforce, and if you don't even feel like you have power, or that you're losing it, how in the world do you muster the time or energy or courage to fight for others to have power? And why would you when it feels as though it'd still leave you in the dust? And this is all so terrifying because it seems like the world is only getting more and more polarized. People are focusing on the wrong things. We keep turning against each other, and when we try to communicate, we're misunderstood, and we don't get a second chance at a communication. That misunderstanding is taken, and it becomes a fact in someone's head, and then everyone is condemned for it. This isn't unique to women, though. Anyone of a specific race that has been discriminated against for being said race has felt this fear too. There is a legal way to take away our rights, and the generations after us are becoming less and less educated. They're unable to read, they're several grades behind where they should be. They have trouble spelling important in 7th grade. This has been in the making for a while, by the way, before COVID. And this all makes for future adults who have no critical thinking skills, will believe whatever myth they see on the internet, and eventually will vote with ignorance. This is fucking terrifying. Knowing that if war or violence breaks out, the kindest thing I can look forward to is a quick death. Being anywhere alone. Remember reading once, being a woman is like walking around with $10,000 in your pocket and everybody knows you have it. I'm a sturdy woman. I'm stronger than every woman I know. I am still easily overpowered by a man half my weight. I'd like to think I'm safe because I'm large and look like I can handle myself, but the truth is I cannot. And it's scary that any man can basically do anything. How men don't see us as people. We're girlfriends, sexual objects, mothers, sisters, a fun night, a prize, a toy, but so rarely a normal, flawed being who deserve as much respect as a man naturally gets from other men. So many women go out with men who don't even like them because they just want a girlfriend, not a partner. It's scary because it feels like we'll never be seen as human beings. More annoying than scary, but it's the constant gaslighting when you experience a discomforting situation or you don't agree with something. I know oftentimes it's simply projection, but it still grinds my gears. My life is always at risk due to violence, but the scariest thing is the extra health risks that come with being a woman, like cancers. Being only seen as a prey or someone you can take advantage of. Also having people create traditions and religions only to shackle you. Then, when they've shackled you, say you are inferior because you have no experience of anything. Men who think it's our job to not be raped or groped by them. Women should be dressing more modestly so as not to force them to behave illegally, aggressively, and violently. Femicide. Women are killed all over the world literally, and I'm not exaggerating, just for being female at the wrong place and time. Even in relatively wealthy places in America, a girl my sister knew in high school was waiting at the bus stop and was kidnapped, raped, and murdered, and her body thrown in the bushes in a park near my house. I think about her every time I walk by that park, and things like that happen to women around the world every day. Feeling unsafe almost everywhere, even in places that would be considered safe, because of all the female abduction, murder, and/or SA news stories. Spending your life trying not to be SA'd, kidnapped, or murdered. You're in a defensive position all the time. We are the only species where the female, if she wants to mate, has to mate with her biggest predator statistically. Pregnancy. For me, it's pregnancy. And the idea that I could potentially get pregnant even if I take every possible precaution, and then I would no longer allowed to be in control of the inside of my own physical body the second I was pregnant. That the government would instantly have the rights to the inside of my fucking actual body. That is the most terrifying thing to me. I'm obviously scared of the dangers of certain violent men, but the idea that other people decided to remove my literal motherfucking bodily goddamn autonomy and give it to the fucking government is one of the most enraging things I've ever experienced in my life. I am terrified to get pregnant, and I am pre-filled with rage that if it happens, I don't get to control it. This is the kind of thing that makes me borderline homicidal when any conservative tries to tell me I don't deserve control over my own body, but that absolute freedom is the most important thing to them. It's one of the only times in my life that I feel genuine rage that could push me to violence. Get the fucking fuck out of my goddamn body. Thanks for watching. What do you think is the scariest part of being a woman? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more eye-opening Reddit discussions. Stay safe and see you next time.